Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from someone, quietly, maybe even broken, and wondered if she'd ever notice what she lost? Not right away. No, not while she's busy trying to prove she doesn't care. Not while she's still surrounded by noise and options. But later, when the silence becomes too loud, when your absence becomes a presence in her world. This is for the man who gave everything, the one who held it together, loved deeply, stayed steady, even when it wasn't returned. This is for the man who chose peace over pride and walked away, not because he stopped loving her, but because he started loving himself more. There's a moment, a real, undeniable moment, when she sits in her car, in her bed, or at some friend's dinner table and it hits her. You're gone. And not just physically. Your energy, your protection, your belief in her gone. That realization is sharp. It's quiet, it's lonely, and it doesn't happen when she's distracted. It happens when she's finally still. Today we're going to talk about that moment, what she feels, what she hides, what she'll never say out loud, but you need to hear anyway. Not to hurt her, not to hate her, but to finally understand you were never invisible. You were just invaluable. There's a strange kind of silence that follows after a man leaves. Not a door slamming exit, not some dramatic goodbye, but the quiet, final decision to stop showing up for someone who never really saw what she had. It's the kind of silence that creeps into her life when she's alone, when her phone isn't lighting up with your name, when the steadiness she used to take for granted just disappears, and it doesn't hit her right away. No, at first she feels something else entirely. Relief maybe, control. That subtle rush of pride that whispers, I'm fine without him, and she'll carry on like that, posting the highlights, surrounding herself with noise, pretending she never even noticed your absence. But that's just the beginning. That's the ego talking. That's the armor she puts on to keep the vulnerability out. But men, listen closely. That moment, when she truly realizes she lost you, isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or tears, not at first. It comes slowly, like mist rising in a quiet room. It begins when she starts reaching for something in her life that just isn't there anymore. Your calm presence, your unshakable belief in her, the way you used to understand her silences without needing explanations. At first, she doesn't realize what's missing. She just feels off, irritable, unsettled. Things don't feel as exciting as they once did. The attention she used to crave, now it feels shallow. The conversations she's having, they lack depth. It's not about the absence of a man, it's about the absence of you. You see, when a woman loses a man who truly saw her, not just her body, not just her beauty, but her soul, there's a reckoning, because in the beginning she thought you were replaceable. She thought, another man will come, one who texts more, who jokes more, who fits better with my image of what I want. But over time reality sets in, because real connection, it's rare. And she starts to notice that the new men in her life, they don't challenge her gently the way you did. They don't listen to her with the same patience. They don't hold space for her when she spirals. They don't ground her. And suddenly, she finds herself comparing, but she won't tell anyone she's doing it. She'll be lying on her bed at night, scrolling through messages, wondering why none of them feel quite right. She'll be laughing with her friends, and mid-laughter, a wave of melancholy will wash over her, and she won't know why, but you will. Because that's the moment it begins. That's when she starts remembering, not the fights, not the flaws, but the man who showed up for her when no one else did. The one who didn't always have the right words, but always had the right heart. The one who stayed even when she pushed, who loved her in her chaos, who believed in her vision even when she doubted herself. And here's the paradox. She will remember you most deeply not in your presence, but in your absence. The things she once rolled her eyes at, your long talks about purpose, the way you sat in silence after arguments instead of yelling, those are the things she starts missing. She'll replay old texts, revisit old pictures, not in some desperate attempt to get you back, but because nostalgia has a cruel way of showing us what we couldn't see when it mattered. She'll think, why did I let him go? And then, why didn't I fight harder? But pride is a heavy thing, and now she's in a battle with herself. Because admitting she lost a man of value means admitting she misjudged you. That she thought she had more time. That she believed you would always be there, quietly waiting because that's what you always did. But you didn't. You walked away. And not in a cruel way, not in a way that shattered her world overnight. You left with dignity, with grace, with peace. And that's what makes it hurt even more. Because if you had exploded, if you had cursed her name, she could have painted you as the villain. But you didn't give her that comfort. Instead, you became the echo, the kind that lingers in a quiet room, the kind that speaks when no one else does. And now, she hears it. In her most vulnerable moments, she hears the words you used to say. She feels your absence like a ghost, present yet unreachable. And here's the beautiful, painful truth. She's not just mourning the man she lost. She's mourning the version of herself she was when she was with you. The woman who felt safe, who felt seen, who didn't need to pretend because you saw through all the performances. You saw her. And that kind of connection, it doesn't fade. It doesn't get replaced easily. It imprints. So even when she's laughing with someone else, she's remembering. Even when she's posting pictures with a new man, she's comparing. Even when she says she's moved on, a part of her is still wondering what it would feel like to be with someone who knew her the way you did. And I want you to understand, this isn't about gloating. This isn't about celebrating someone's regret. No, this is about you finally seeing your worth through the eyes of the one who didn't. Because you loved deeply, you gave honestly, you showed up when it mattered. And sometimes the deepest recognition doesn't come from applause. It comes in the silence that follows your exit. It comes when the woman you loved realizes that she didn't lose a man. She lost the man. And now the tables have turned. She was once the one who decided when and how she showed up. She called the rhythm. She led the dance. But you stepped off the floor, and now she's standing there, still holding her hand out, wondering why no one else leads the way you did. Why no one else hears the music the same way. Why she can't quite find the same harmony. Because she didn't lose comfort, she lost clarity. She didn't lose a boyfriend, she lost a mirror, one that reflected the most raw, honest version of who she could have become, if only she had met you halfway. And that realization, it's not loud, it's not shouted from rooftops or written in captions. It's whispered in those quiet, sleepless nights when she can't shake the feeling that she had something rarer and let it slip away. And that whisper, it doesn't go away. At first she might fight it, she'll drown it in distractions, new dates, long nights out, spontaneous plans, photos meant to tell the world she's fine. And she might even believe it for a while. The world around her will affirm it. You're better off, or was too sensitive. You needed someone more exciting. And she'll nod, laugh, sip her drink, and pretend it's all behind her. But that whisper doesn't care about appearances. It waits. It lingers in the corners of her heart, in the quiet spaces, the ones she can't fill with noise or novelty. It shows up when she least expects it, in the scent of your cologne on someone else. In the way another man fumbles through her emotions instead of holding space for them. In the softness of a memory that doesn't hurt, but stings. You see, the mistake we often make is believing love can be replaced, that connection can be replicated. But the truth is, there are loves that brand us, not with pain, but with presence, your presence. The way you paid attention, the way you didn't flinch when she was messy, when she doubted herself, when she made it hard to love her. You stayed. And now she's realizing how rare that is, because most men, they love the version of a woman who is easy to love, the smiling, polished, charming parts. But you love the parts she hides, the anger, the anxiety, the dreams she barely said out loud, the insecurities she was ashamed of. You didn't run. You listened. You made her feel that she didn't have to perform, that her worst day was still a day she deserved to be loved. And now that kind of love is missing. Even if she's with someone new, the depth is different. The intimacy isn't in the way they kiss or hold hands. It's in how they misunderstand her silences, how they look away when her emotions get too complex, how they try to fix her instead of feeling her. That's when the ache starts. That ache isn't about longing for the past. It's the ache of truth. The realization that she once had a man who wasn't intimidated by her depth, and that she let him go, often without even knowing what she was losing. But let's talk about why. Because we often villainize women for not recognizing a good man. But it's more complicated than that. Sometimes we reject the love we don't believe we deserve. Sometimes we push away the one who mirrors back to us a version of ourselves we're not ready to face. Your patience, your calm, your belief in her, it was beautiful, but it also confronted her with her own chaos. And not everyone is ready for that mirror. So she ran, maybe not physically, but emotionally she distanced herself. She created tension. She picked fights, not because she didn't love you, but because loving you made her feel seen. And being seen was terrifying, because deep down she feared that if you saw everything, you'd leave, so she left first. But here's the irony, you did see everything, and you stayed until one day you didn't, not out of anger, not to punish her, but because your self-love finally spoke louder than your devotion, because you realized that love without reciprocity is a slow erosion, and you chose wholeness over hope. Now, she's left with the echoes, the memories that aren't just sweet, they're sobering, because they remind her of a version of love she didn't know how to receive, and a man who loved her anyway. And here's something you might not expect. She's not telling anyone how much she misses you. She can't. Pride is a powerful mask. She wears it well. She'll talk about how she's moved on, how you were too emotional, how she needs someone more her pace. But her eyes, they'll say something else. They'll glaze over when your name comes up. They'll soften when a mutual friend brings you into conversation. They'll avoid your photos like they're landmines. Because when a woman realizes she's lost a man of value, it becomes an internal reckoning, a quiet grief, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but keeps showing up anyway, in the songs, in the moments, in the things she thought she could forget but can't. And it's in this space that regret lives. Not dramatic regret, but subtle, quiet, aching regret. The kind that whispers, I didn't know what I had, and now I can't get it back. That's the moment when the illusion of control fades. When she stops asking, was he the right one for me? and starts wondering, was I the right one for him? When she starts questioning her choices, not from a place of guilt, but from a deeper awareness that not everything can be undone. Now, she watches you from a distance, maybe through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe through the universe aligning paths in quiet, serendipitous ways, and she sees you evolving, grounded, peaceful, maybe even thriving in your solitude. And that stings more than any angry goodbye ever could, because you didn't spiral, you didn't chase. You didn't beg, you healed, and there's nothing more unsettling to someone who expected you to wait than seeing you walk away with grace, not bitterness, not resentment, just peace. That's when she realizes you didn't leave to punish her, you left to protect yourself, that your love was never a performance, that your presence wasn't weakness, it was strength. And she sees now what she couldn't see then, you were the safe place, and she's lost it. Not because you stopped loving her, but because she didn't know how to meet you at the same depth. She was searching for something exciting, dramatic, validating, and she missed what was real, what was enduring, what was healing. Now, she's left with the knowledge that some goodbyes aren't door slams. They're doors that quietly close and never open again. And she might never say it out loud. She might never send that message. But inside, she's mourning you. Mourning what could have been, mourning the man who saw her not just as she was, but as she could be, the man who loved her even when she made it hard, the man who showed her a version of love that wasn't transactional, but transformational. That grief is hers now, and you are free, but freedom after deep love, it doesn't come without its own echoes, does it? There's still the memory of her laughter, the way her eyes softened when she was at ease, the warmth you felt when she let you in. You don't forget those things. You don't pretend they didn't exist. You carry them not as burdens, but as reminders of how deep you're capable of going, of how much you gave, how deeply you showed up. But here's where your freedom begins to bloom. When you stop confusing love with sacrifice. When you realize that being there for someone isn't the same as being responsible for their growth. That being present in her pain didn't mean it was your job to heal it for her. That love, real love, cannot survive if only one person is showing up for both. That's what she didn't understand. Or maybe couldn't understand. You weren't asking for perfection. You were asking for reciprocity. And now, as she faces the reality of life without you, she starts to realize how one-sided it was. How much she leaned on your emotional strength. How often she let you hold space for both of you without ever learning how to do the same. That's the part that stings her the most. Not that you left, but that she didn't recognize what you were holding until your hands were empty. And still, she won't say it. Not out loud. Because to admit she lost a man of such quiet strength is to admit she misjudged what mattered. And for someone who spent her life believing she was always right, always in control, always the one being chased, at this loss is a humbling one. But she feels it in the way she keeps coming back to the same songs, the same streets, the same time of night where her mind wanders not to the man she's dating, but to the one who loved her through her most unlovable moments. And now she is learning the difference between attention and devotion, between desire and care, between lust and love, because the world offers her attention, but it does not offer her depth. It does not offer her the kind of patience you brought, the stability, the safety, the feeling that she didn't have to earn your love, only accept it. That's the part she misses most, the way you loved without demand, without needing her to prove anything. You didn't want her perfection, you wanted her presence. You wanted honesty even when it was messy. You wanted truth even when it was hard. But she wasn't ready, and that's not your burden to carry anymore. You see, when a woman realizes she's lost a man who anchored her, not to himself, but to her own potential, she begins to feel the disorientation, not because she needs a man to complete her, but because she felt more herself when she was with you. Not because you defined her, but because you reflected a version of her that was becoming. And now, without that mirror, she doesn't quite know who she is. And here's the part that might surprise you. Sometimes the deepest grief doesn't come from the heart, but from the identity. She's grieving the version of herself that only came alive in your presence. The one who dreamed bigger, loved deeper, softened more, because your love wasn't just about romance, it was about expansion, about becoming, and that kind of love doesn't just disappear, it lingers. In her memories, in her regrets, in her quiet moments when the world isn't asking her to pretend. She remembers the way you held her when she cried, not with impatience but with reverence. The way you looked at her when she wasn't dressed up, when she wasn't trying to impress anyone. The way you respected her mind, even when you disagreed. She remembers your gentleness, your stillness, your strength, and now she notices how loud everything else is, the drama, the games, the shallow conversations, the exhausting performance of modern love where everyone's trying to win and no one's trying to connect. And suddenly, the man who felt too serious, too deep, too intense, now feels like the one who truly saw her, but you are no longer within reach. That's the shift. You've moved on, not with resentment, but with reverence for yourself. You've begun to build a life that doesn't orbit around anyone else's potential, a life rooted in your own clarity, your own healing, your own joy, and that's the part she'll never forget. Not that you were kind, not that you loved her, but that you left when it became clear that staying meant losing yourself, that you didn't let love become your prison, that you didn't let devotion become your self-abandonment, that you chose wholeness over history. She thought you'd stay. She thought you'd always be there. And for a long time you gave her every chance, every opening, every opportunity to meet you where you were. And when she didn't, you did the thing she never expected. You stopped showing up. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped justifying your feelings. You stopped trying to make her understand what she wasn't ready to hear. And that silence, that decision, it echoed louder than any words ever could. And now you are the memory she revisits, not because she wants to, but because she can't help it. You are the standard she didn't realize she was setting too low for. You are the man she thought she had time to figure out, and now she's out of time. But you're not bitter. You're not angry. You're not walking around with a chip on your shoulder. You're not seeking revenge or validation. You are simply free. And there is nothing more powerful, more magnetic, more liberating than a man who knows his value and no longer begs to be seen. You've stopped waiting for her to realize it. And that's exactly when she does. That's exactly when she does. Because the universe has a sense of timing we never quite control. It delivers truth not in thunderclaps, but in mirrors, in patterns that repeat, in choices that loop. And one day, maybe during some ordinary afternoon or after a date that left her emptier than before, she'll feel it in her bones. I let something real slip away. She won't say it, not directly. Maybe she'll send a neutral text just to check in. Maybe she'll comment on a post. Maybe she'll reach out to your friend, curious about your life. But it's not casual. It's not innocent. It's a breadcrumb, a test. She wants to know if there's still space in your heart, if the door she once closed is still unlocked. But by now you're different, and that scares her, because now you respond slowly, if at all. Now your energy is calm but distant. Now your words are no longer laced with that old hunger. And when she looks at you, even if it's through a screen or a friend's story, she sees a man who has built a home within himself. A man who is no longer searching for belonging in someone else's arms. A man who doesn't beg to be understood, but walks with the quiet confidence of someone who understands himself. And that, my dear listener, is the plot twist. She spent so much time believing she held the power, that her withdrawal would bring you closer, that her inconsistency would make you chase, that you'd always be the one reaching across the distance. But something changed. Slowly, quietly. You stopped performing, you stopped pleading, you stopped hoping she'd see what you were trying so hard to show. Because you finally saw it. You finally saw that love without reciprocation is not love, it's worship. And you're not here to worship anyone. You're here to love and be loved. Fully, equally, gently, fiercely. Without confusion, without delay, without emotional games that turn romance into war. And she knows it now. She knows she's no longer the one with the power. Because true power was never in her silence or her delay. It was in your presence, in your constancy, in your integrity, in your love. And now that she can't feel it anymore, now that your energy has turned inward, it becomes a loss she can't fill with anyone else. Because no one else knows her like you did. Not because of time, but because of depth. You understood her trauma, not just her triggers. You heard the words she didn't say. You held her when she didn't know how to ask for comfort. You gave her space, even when it hurt you to do so. And most of all, you saw her potential even when she was too afraid to believe in it herself. And here's the hard truth. Not everyone is ready for that kind of love. Some people spend their whole lives running from it. Not because they don't want to be loved, but because they never learned how to receive love without feeling exposed, without feeling small, without needing to be in control. You gave her something sacred, and she mistook it for something standard. And now that you're gone, she's learning what it means to miss a man's soul, not just his presence. She's learning that you weren't just a chapter in her life. You were the part of the story where she could have turned everything around, where she could have built something lasting, where she could have evolved. But that door has closed now, and what remains a lesson, one that cuts through pride and penetrates deeply, because losing someone like you isn't like other losses. It's not just a failed relationship. It's a missed opportunity for transformation. And deep down she knows she didn't just lose you. She lost the version of herself that only you brought to the surface. And that version, she's trying to find it again. But she's doing it alone now. She may go to therapy. She may start journaling. She may dive into healing. But that's her journey now, not yours. Because you're not responsible for her growth anymore. You're not the one who needs to hold space for her epiphanies. You've graduated from that chapter. With scars, yes, but also with wisdom, with clarity, with strength. And now you walk into rooms differently. You know what you offer. You know your love isn't desperate, it's discerning. You've become the man who no longer chases potential. You wait for readiness. You look for presence. You seek a partner, not a project. And that evolution, it didn't come easy. It came through fire, through heartbreak, through silence. through the long nights where you questioned your worth. And now you don't question it anymore. And she sees that it's the thing she can't look away from, that you've become the man she always wanted you to be, just not for her. And that's the deepest cut, because she had you when you were willing, when you were open, when you were waiting. But now she has to sit with the knowledge that the man she once knew is no longer reachable. You are no longer accessible. You've become the man another woman will get to meet. One who knows himself, who values himself, who doesn't need to explain his depth. And here's where it gets even more powerful. You no longer need closure. You no longer need her to understand what she lost, because understanding isn't the point anymore. Peace is, growth is, forward is. You don't carry bitterness. You carry boundaries. You don't chase apologies. You embody forgiveness from a distance. You don't speak of her with hatred. You speak of her with gratitude, not because it ended well, but because it ended, and that ending, it gave birth to the man you are now, a man who no longer settles, a man who leads himself, a man who knows the difference between being chosen and being convenient. That is what she sees now, and there is no going back. There is no going back. And that's what makes this ending so different, not dramatic, not explosive, just final, like a chapter closing with no need to reread the pages, because the lesson has already been lived, breathed, and felt in every fiber of your being. And now you are living in your own becoming, a life no longer tied to someone else's unreadiness. You're not bitter. That's what she didn't expect. She thought you'd break, that you'd collapse under the weight of her absence, that you'd orbit her memory like a man haunted by what if. But instead you expanded. You became more of yourself, more grounded, more sure, more at peace. You stopped trying to prove your worth to someone who couldn't recognize it, and started offering that worth only to those who already do. And her, she's watching, not always with eyes, sometimes with silence, sometimes with that ache that sits in the gut and doesn't quite leave. She's watching the man she once held in her hands walk like he was never broken. She's watching you glow in rooms she thought you'd never enter without her. She's watching you give your depth, your joy, your calm, your love, to a world that didn't require her permission to receive it. That is the moment she understands, truly, deeply, that she didn't just lose you. She lost herself in the process of losing you. Because what you gave her wasn't just companionship, it was expansion, a mirror, a chance to grow, to evolve, to soften. And now she walks through her life, carrying the quiet knowledge that she closed a door not because the room was wrong, but because she didn't yet know how to sit in it. And you've stopped waiting for her to knock again. You're no longer obsessed with whether she remembers, whether she regrets, whether she feels the weight of the love you carried for her. You've left that version of you behind, the one who needed closure, who hoped for a change of heart, who waited for her to wake up, because you woke up instead. And now, the man who used to question his own value is walking into his own life without apology, without permission, without fear. You are creating joy from within, building something sacred with your own hands. Maybe for yourself, maybe someday with someone new, but never again for someone who can't meet you there. This is your wholeness. And maybe, just maybe, you're sitting across from someone new now. Someone who meets your gaze with softness, not strategy, who doesn't make you beg to be heard, who doesn't confuse consistency with weakness, who understands that real love isn't about possession, it's about presence. And in her eyes, you see something you never saw in the past. Peace, no games, no guessing, just calm. And that calm doesn't mean it's boring, it means it's safe. You've finally learned that safety is not the absence of passion, it's the soil where real passion grows. Passion without fear, love without drama, connection without collapse. And that's something the woman from your past may never fully know. She will remember you in flashes, not just the way you held her hand, but the way you held her heart, not just the way you looked at her, but the way you saw her. She'll remember the emotional depth, the spiritual steadiness, the way your silence felt louder than anyone's noise. But those memories, they belong to her now. They are hers to carry, not yours. You have set them down, because healing doesn't always look like answer. Sometimes it looks like distance, like clarity, like finally understanding that love is not about convincing, it's about choosing, every day, in every small way. And when someone doesn't choose you, you don't chase. You bless them on their way and choose yourself instead. That is the most powerful thing a man can do, to walk away with his integrity, his softness, his depth intact, and never offer them again to someone who once looked you in the eyes and still said, not enough, you are enough, you were always enough. She just wasn't ready to receive what you had to give. And that's okay. We don't blame people for where they are in their journey, but we don't stay there waiting for them to catch up either. We keep walking. Soft heart, firm boundaries, head held high. And now this is your new chapter. A chapter where you don't carry old wounds like trophies. You carry them like wisdom, where your heart still feels, but doesn't break so easily. Where you love, not from fear of being alone, but from the abundance of finally knowing yourself. And maybe one day she'll say it. Maybe one day she'll whisper to a friend or into the dark, he was the one. I just wasn't ready. And maybe that will bring her healing. Or maybe it won't. But you've already healed. You've already moved. you've already risen. Because you were never just a man she dated. You were the turning point. You were the lesson she didn't know she needed. And now you're free, not just from her, but from the version of yourself that needed her to see you. Because you see yourself now. And there is nothing more powerful than a man who no longer needs to be seen to know that he matters.